Ah, and it's all my fault. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Don't worry. I couldn't hear anything either. Fine. Anyway, hello everyone. Thank you so much for bearing with us while we try to make the computer work. That was very exciting. I won't blame Rowan really.
I
So
would.
let us see what we can talk about today. So today we are talking about choosing a college when coming to apply to Oxford or Cambridge. This is a relatively small part of the application, but of course makes a fairly big deal once you're there. So we're going to be talking about the different things that your college will impact once you're there, as well as talking a little bit about the opportunities there are for a little bit of strategy, a little bit of tactics in the context of the application. For those of you who've been to one of these before, which I hope is lots of you, my name is Matt. I look after the research side of things here at UniAdmissions. So my job is to make sure that all of the things that we suggest to you in this webinar, in our work more widely, are backed up with spreadsheets and that sort of thing. It's an interesting bit of work, and we'll certainly be looking at a little bit of data today. But if you are keen for even more data, next week we'll be talking about the UCAT, particularly focusing on UCAT scoring, how it lines up with different universities. That's going to be really interesting and is definitely going to have some graphs in it. So if that's the kind of thing that really motivates you, then you'll want to join us for that. Even if you're not applying to study medicine, you might just come along for the graphs, just for the fun of it anyway. Rowan, who are you aside from
So I did do an introduction, but as I found out, my mic wasn't working. So my name is Rowan. I'm Rowan Windsor. I am a admissions consultant here at UniAdmissions. Generally, I'm the person that you'd speak to, or I'm one of the people you would speak to if you are interested in how we can help with your particular application. And we can go a lot more into detail about obviously what we offer here with our programs and being able to obviously help support you with your application itself.
Fab, thank you. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking today a little bit about what the college system is, how it works, how the colleges differ from one another and how that'll impact your experience at university, and then talking about the strategy there might be to applying for colleges as well. So to start off with, there are a lot of them. For convenience sake, I'm focusing on Oxford colleges in my examples today, but 99.9% of what I'm going to discuss is going to be applicable to Cambridge as well. It's simply that it's easier from a kind of graphics point of view to do one rather than the other. As you can see, there are a lot of Oxford colleges, ranging going back right to the 13th century, whereas some of them are as new as, I believe there's a new one coming in the next couple of years, actually. I've seen them building it. Hopefully they'll finish. But it really is a long-standing thing. So I think we will very soon be at the point where there are 800 years between the oldest and the newest college, which is a very long time. So what do the colleges do? If you're sort of applying without having any personal contacts who've been to Oxford or Cambridge, no one in your family, there maybe isn't anyone at your school, the college system will seem a little confusing because you'll think to yourself, well, I'm applying to the university. Why do I also have to apply to a college? What's going on here? So the reason for this is that each of the colleges operates as a kind of miniature university. They have about, most of them will take about 100 students a year. Most of them were from a mix of the different subjects the university teaches. So there'll be maybe half a dozen other students studying the same subject as you in your college. And that'll be the case across every college at the university. So if there are, say, 20 colleges and there are 100 people studying, let's say, economics, then there'll be 5 at each college. And that means you get to build a really close relationship with the people at your college studying your subject. And that is how the tutorials will work, which we're going to come back to in a second. One of the great advantages of Oxford and Cambridge is, for the most part, you will be able to stay at the college in college accommodation for the full time you are there. So you will sleep there. Almost all of them, if not all, will have food for you. So you don't have to do your own cooking. You can just wander on down to the dining hall and get fed. which was very much my favorite part of my time at Cambridge. There will be discrete student societies for your college. So there'll be a university-wide, I don't know, orchestra, but there might be a little one in your college. There might be a university-wide Shakespeare society, but there might be a drama or theatre society at your college. And you'll have your tutorials there as well. So you'll be working with the other students at your college studying your subject in these really small, quite intense little group sessions with academics from your college. So you'll really get that, 3-to-1, 4-to-1, 5-to-1 attention, and that's every week. So you get an unbelievable amount of direct contact with the academics at your college, but thanks to the college system. And it's also where the library, there's another library. There are other libraries you can go to, but most of the college libraries at Oxford and Cambridge 24/7 now. So you can study there, you can sleep there. It should, particularly in your first year, only be a very short walk from your from where your room is. So you'll be spending a lot of time in the library with any luck. Don't sleep in the library though, very uncomfortable, bad for your neck. Can't recommend it. As I mentioned earlier, the colleges have been going, we've got a real 800 year kind of span of them. And that means that there are some fairly substantial differences, which we'll come on to later. And in general, the older colleges tend to be the ones that are perceived as being more prestigious. Now, as we'll come to later, that isn't necessarily a big deal. But the way I tend to think of this is that colleges are very much like sports teams. I've chosen my own preferred sport of football here, which is to say that everyone who has a team will say that their team is good. They will support them. They will stand up for them. You don't meet people who go, "Oh, my team's rubbish. I actually wish I supported a different team." That's not really how it's supposed to work. And this tends to be how people feel about their colleges. Even if you don't necessarily get to choose which college you go to, just like you might not have a choice about being a Crystal Palace fan because your dad is a Crystal Palace fan and it's too late now. You've been indoctrinated by your family. Pretty much everyone is happy with their college, and so I wouldn't worry too much about about picking based on factors like prestige and age at the first. And we'll sort of talk through all of this in detail as we go through the presentation. The other thing to say is that they do compete, sort of. This is what is called the Tompkins Table. And this is just the measure of the exam results of the different colleges. So as you can see, this is unbelievably hard to understand. I believe this was pioneered as a graphical representation by Jackson Pollock. You can very much see the Jackson Pollock vibe it has to it. And what you'll see here is that the colleges all vary in terms of which ones generate the most firsts, and they all bounce around a bit. So there aren't any colleges that are bad, so to speak. There isn't a college that's full of stupid people. There isn't a college that's full of unbelievably clever people. They're all good, is the thing to say. You're not going to find yourself disadvantaged by having gone to a less prestigious, newer, whatever college when it comes to the job market afterwards. The important thing is that you went to Oxford or Cambridge. So that brings us on to a little bit more of the lifestyle kind of stuff. How do the colleges differ? What is the experience going to be like for you? As I mentioned a moment ago, a degree from every college is just as valid as a degree from every other college. When you come to apply for a job, no one will be asking you which college you went to, probably until after they've given you an offer. And it is generally in the world of work considered to be a bit of a show-offy thing to mention at all. People will already be a little intimidated when you tell them, "Oh, I went to Cambridge." But if you then find another person who went to Cambridge and you stand there talking about Cambridge things in a show-offy way, people don't tend to like it. So the college probably won't come up a great deal once you've graduated, but it'll be something that's really important to you because it's going to have a really big impact on different parts of how you experience Oxbridge. And it's going to feel, like we mentioned with the sports teams, it's going to feel something that you're really personally connected to with any luck. I certainly still have a lot of affection for my college. So the first of these things that'll impact is the location. And I think this touches on one or two of the questions that we've already had come through. So we're looking at a map of Cambridge here. And what you'll see is that the sort of buff section right in the middle is the centre of Cambridge. I think I can use the pointer actually, can't I? Yes, so sort of here is the centre of Cambridge. And as you'll see, some of the colleges are right in the centre, that's where most of them are. And some of them are a little further out, your Wolfson and Girton. The story with Girton, in terms of the location, is that Girton was the first college at Cambridge to admit women. And so the decision was made that it should be far away so that the women wouldn't distract the men at all the other colleges. As the theory was that the men would be easily distracted by the women, but that they wouldn't go up a hill. Because there's quite a big hill along Huntingdon Road up there to Girton. And the theory was that the men, no matter how much they loved the company of women, would be too lazy to go uphill. Whether this worked or not remains to be, is an open question. But if you've been wondering why Girton is there, that's why. It's to stop people from kissing too far. Can't be bothered. But this is something to take into account when you're looking at college choice. You know, is it really important to you to be a 3-minute walk from the nightclubs? Do you want to be a little closer to the train station? Do you want to have a little bit more peace and quiet by being a little bit further out? Do you want to be near to the libraries? Now, Cambridge is pretty small. I haven't got anything for scale for this, but you could fit all of Cambridge inside Hyde Park. So we are not talking about a big place. So distances are very much relative. You'll find, particularly in Cambridge, that people suddenly become very lazy, and the idea of walking for 10 minutes suddenly becomes exhausting because of how small the place is. But all of the colleges are pretty central. It's only once you've been living there for a while and you're used to only having to walk for 3 minutes to get to anything that you might start complaining about the distance. So to a normal person, even Girton isn't that far away. The next thing to think about is the accommodation. Almost all colleges will have enough space for all of their students for all 3 years. Some of this will be on site of the college, some of it will be a short walk down the road. And it does mean that if you are lucky, particularly in later years when the more architecturally appealing rooms come around, you may end up with a room like this, a really cool looking room, great for Instagram. Now, this isn't going to be the case at every college. It's certainly not the case at every room. Much like any other university, you're much more likely to end up with something like this, a room with a lovely big wardrobe blocking the way out of the bed. Now, the thing to remember here, and this is useful to know, is that because the colleges own most of the accommodation, the rates at Cambridge and Oxford as well tend to be much more reasonable than they are at other universities. You're probably not going to get ripped off as much as you would in London or in other parts of the country where the student hall system has been largely privatized. Where I live in Bournemouth, student halls are unbelievably expensive because the university doesn't own any of them and they all belong to companies with names like Student Roost or Diggs Co. And it costs, in some places, you know, £150, £200 a week. Yeah, it's expensive. You will be protected from that at Oxford and Cambridge because the landlord is your college, and they tend to be much nicer about it than some of the commercial landlords you'll find in other places. So if you're worried about cost, because you know Oxford and Cambridge, they're nice places, they are expensive to live. The good news is that the university puts a real effort into subsidising the cost of accommodation, and so that shouldn't be a worry for you. The next thing to think about, and this is very much related to what we've just looked at there with accommodation, is the question of architecture. Now, this isn't the kind of thing that excites everyone, but if one of the reasons you want to go to Oxford and Cambridge is for the Hogwarts factor, there definitely is some Hogwarts if you really want that. You can get the columns and the marble and the old-fashioned-y stuff and the statues. That is very much available. However, the newer colleges tend to be less Hogwartsy. This is Fitzwilliam. Is this Fitz? This is either Fitzwilliam or Churchill in Cambridge. I can't remember which is more 70s and less 1570s. Now, the advantage of a college like this is that it actually has insulation, unlike the older colleges. You may even get an ensuite, very much not the case in the older buildings. But if you are interested in Oxford and Cambridge for the Hogwarts factor, then you're going to get a fair bit less of that at some of the newer colleges. Again, I wouldn't make your application decision on the basis of that alone. But as we'll see when we come to have a look at the numbers, how pretty and how old the colleges are tends to be a fairly big factor in people's decision making. Whether you want it to be in your decision making or not is a question for you. Rowan, what do you? I actually quite like this kind of low-rise 70s thing. I think it's quite fun. I think they've just taken the photo on a bad day.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it feels like with a building like that, things would be a lot closer to where you're actually needing to go. So you won't need to travel, big long hauls just to get to the next place and things like that. So I think that would, I kind of like that kind of building, and it's not it's not like grandiose or anything, but yeah.
Yeah, and I can tell you from my experience of having done work in the Hogwartsiest building of them all, the Houses of Parliament, it is cold. So cold. Those old buildings, you cannot heat them up. So in the winter, they are freezing. So if that's something that bothers you, then again, that may be somewhere you want to avoid. I'd say if you're going to do any work in Parliament, make sure you take a jacket, regardless of what time of the year it is. It is the coldest place I've ever been that was the indoors. Remarkable, really. I don't know how the people there cope. The next thing is to think about grants and bursaries. The wealth of the colleges does vary. Some of them are very rich, some of them are merely rich. And so if you are looking at very specific things in terms of maybe music grants, or you want to play the organ, or you want to go on a particular study abroad trip or things like that, it's worth having a look at what opportunities your college offers, as there will be some specific things available that you may be able to take advantage of. At my college in Cambridge, there was an opportunity to go to Harvard for a term, which was handed out to a top student each year. It was not me. I have never been a top student. And that was fairly unique to my college. And so if things like that are particularly motivating for you, then keep an eye out for that. The next thing to think about, and this does motivate me, is the food and drink. Now, the quality of food and drink varies substantially between colleges. Some colleges have absolutely outstanding food. This was very much the case for my college when I was at Cambridge. Pretty much the best food in Cambridge by all reports, certainly the best I tried. Other colleges, the food is quite bad. Now, this doesn't seem perhaps like the most urgent thing in the world, but having good food at the college will save you money because it will be cheaper than going anywhere else. And hopefully it will mean that you get to have your lunch in a fancy dining hall, which is always nice. There will be a selection of formal dinners with the standing up and the speeches and the Latin toasts and things like that. Don't worry, no one will expect you to know what you're doing. You'll be in there with a bunch of other first years who don't know either. But the food and drink is an important part of the Oxbridge experience. It's one of the parts that is completely unique to Oxford and Cambridge. It's not something that you're going to get at King's or UCL. And so if that's something that's important to you, it certainly was to me, it's worth having a look around to make sure you've gone for a college with good food. I wouldn't make that the sole basis for your decision, but if in the interview they ask you, so why did you pick this college? A slightly funny tongue-in-cheek answer, like apparently the food is very good, is probably better than you not having an answer at all, and certainly better than just going, well, I wanted to come here because Newton was here. And they're like, 400 years ago, he is dead now. Always a favorite of mine, that one. Don't pick a college based on your favorite dead person. They won't be there. They're dead. Even if they're not dead, they've probably graduated by now. That takes us on to subjects and the teaching style. Now, there are a very small number of subjects that aren't taught at all colleges. It is a tiny number. It's mostly small courses, things like Classics and English at Oxford, Anglo-Saxon, Norse and Celtic at Cambridge. Double check that the college you're applying to offers the course that you want to do. If they don't offer the course, then don't apply there, pick somewhere else. But that's not a huge worry. It's going to affect maybe 3 or 4% of applicants. And the other thing to think about is once you're in the college, you're going to be having that close contact with other students studying your course, other people studying the course, the academics from the college who are covering that course, as well as the wider lectures across the university. So it'll have a little bit of an impact on the teaching you receive. And so if you've got a particular favorite economist and you can pick to go to their college, then you may as well. It's a nice touch. It's better than picking someone who's a dead celebrity as far as motivations go. But, you know, bear in mind that if you're going for a real celebrity person, chances are they won't be there all the time. I don't think Richard Dawkins is around all that much at Oxford anymore. Mary Beard has retired. Stephen Hawking is dead. I'm trying to think of anyone else. God, we're running low on celebrity academics at this point, aren't we? We've got to do something about that. So I've seen a whole bunch of questions already coming through in the chat about strategy. So let's have a look. Is there a strategy? So what I've got here, and I appreciate this never works beautifully on PowerPoint, is the college by college admissions data for Oxford from last year. What you'll see is that the acceptance rates, the number of applications vary quite a bit from college to college. So we can see here that Brasenose had over 1,200 applicants, Worcester 1,400 applicants, whereas only 245 people wanted to go to St Hilda's College, only 352 wanted to go to St Peter's College, and only 278 wanted to go to Corpus. What that tells you is that people don't want to go to the colleges that are named after saints, is I guess the main pattern we've established there. Yeah, because St Hugh's isn't popular either. What have they got against saints? But what you'll see is that there's a big variation in terms of the number of students applying to each college. So the most popular ones will have close to 1,000, and the least popular ones will have maybe only a quarter of that. Now, this again, as we talked about earlier, is going to be largely down to how famous the place is, how Hogwartsy it is. These are the things that people tend to pick on, because if you've been around Oxford for an open day, those are the things that are going to stick out, the grandeur and the architecture. Now, what you would expect is that would mean that these more popular colleges are easier to get into, are harder to get into, right? More people competing for the same number of places. Now, let's see. Oh, those annotations have stayed on. Those look hideous. Let's see if I can get rid of those. As I said, the second most popular college at Oxford last year was Brasenose. I'm not including Worcester here because Worcester has it's a little bit complicated with the way that Worcester handles A-level results in a way that is different from the other colleges. And so it's not worth getting into. I might address it in the Q&A. But the most popular college, apart from Worcester last year at Oxford, was Brasenose, and they had 1,200, nearly 1,300 applicants going for 107 places. Now, if you can do maths, which hopefully you all can, because you'll need to, that means that only around 8% of people applying for Brasenose were successful. Now, at the other end of the scale, we talked about St Hilda's, only 245 applications, and they had not 212 places, they had 102. Someone can't type, can they? And so they had a 42% chance. So you're looking at nearly more than 5 times the chance if you're applying for Brasenose, St Hilda's to Brasenose. Right? Right? That sounds right, doesn't it, Rowan?
Yeah.
Ah, that's wrong. Unfortunately, the universities have thought of this. They figured this one out. And so what you will see is that Oxford will make sure that you are interviewed at more than one college. If you applied for a really popular college like Brasenose, you'll have an interview, maybe 2 there. And then they will send you down the road to have an interview at one of the less popular colleges as well. Cambridge will interview you at the college you apply for. They'll then put all of those scores into a big list, and the students who are good but not the top students for the college they've applied for go into what's called the winter pool, and all the colleges that are short on students go in and literally fish them out. They have fishing rods. It's a whole thing. It's very, very impressive ritual, well worth watching. And so in practice, what happens is that even though there is a huge gap in popularity between Brasenose and St Hilda's, 17% of people who apply to Brasenose end up at Oxford, and so does 16% of people who apply to St Hilda's. They end up at Oxford. So in the end, it makes no difference at all to your chances of getting into Oxford or Cambridge. Now, if you're really preoccupied with which college you want to go to, then you want to be aiming for a college that has a higher level of acceptance of first choice people. Now, this means going for a college that is popular, but not too popular. So if you look at this third column here, accepted at college of choice, you'll see that while Brasenose is right down the bottom at 7%, there, you'll see that there are plenty of colleges that are as much as double that. So if you're not fussed, if you don't want to go to Brasenose, you go to Lincoln, which is also nice and old. You could go to, which ones are these? Jesus, also very old. Hartford, nice and old. You know, you've got lots of options in terms of going for other prestigious, fancy, old-looking colleges, even if Brasenose, the most popular one, isn't quite for you. I was not in the 12% of people that got into Magdalen when I applied, and that was nearly 15 years ago now. So maybe things have got harder since then. No, sorry, I mean maybe things have got easier since then. I want to say they were harder when I was young and unsuccessful, and that's why it was okay. But as you can see, the impact on your chance of getting into Oxford are pretty slim. The college that ends up with the most people actually accepted at the university is Wadham with 20. At the low end, it's Christchurch with 13. Now we know from previous weeks that the average Oxford acceptance rate is something of the order of 17.5%, 18%, which falls right in the middle. So college choice is not, generally speaking, going to have a massive impact on your chance of getting into the university or not. However, there is a but. While your choice of college will not have a big impact on whether you get in or not, you do need to choose one because people who apply with an open application, they do worse all the time. Our latest data showed that about 8% of people who apply to Oxford and don't pick a college, they get in around 8% of the time. People who pick a college, closer to 18, 19, 20%. Why there is this huge variation, we do not know. I have not been able to figure out a causal mechanism for this, but we have a few guesses. My main guess is that people who are applying with an open application are doing it perhaps less seriously. They've spent less time, less research on it, and so are weaker applicants overall. Now, I don't think that's big enough to explain the full gap of 12 points for such a small factor. It may be that students who put in open applications are distributed amongst the colleges for consideration later, and that has some kind of impact on their chances. But broadly speaking, we don't know why it is that open applications are a bad idea. But what we do know is if you take two otherwise identical students from the data, and one of them puts in an open application, and one of them picks a college literally at random, it seems to be better to pick a college at random than to pick no college at all. As I say, we do not know why, but that is the one really official piece of data recommendation we have from this. I would really like to find out why this happens, but so far the university has refused to release the data to me to explain it. Maybe one day. Speaking of more information about the Oxbridge colleges, we have a book. This one was written by me. I know. I don't write a book. If you are interested in picking out which college you would like to attend, I recommend picking up from Amazon the Ultimate Oxbridge College Guide, written by me. It is a set of profiles of different colleges written by myself in collaboration with students from those colleges. We have information about every college at Oxford and Cambridge. We have profiles of a day in the life of students studying all of the most popular subjects. And it contains information right from which colleges have the best food, which have the nicest accommodation, which ones have the cheapest bar, which ones have the best parties, all those important things to know. And it's a great resource. It's included with all of our programs, which Rowan is going to tell you about right now.
I'm having just a wee quick issue here. Hold on. Lovely. So programs are obviously the way that we help our students, and we sort of help them through every part of the application process, as I stated before, with things like the interviews, the personal statements, and also obviously the particular admissions tests that you'll be doing for your courses. So if we just swap over here, the way that we help with our students is sort of, there's four main parts essentially of how we help. And the first thing, if we just swap slides here, is our one-to-one tuition. So these are tutors who have studied the same courses that you would be looking for. So they've been through the application process. They've done, they're generally within the top 10% of their tests nationally for their results for their admission tests, and they've helped other students as well. So they've been through all of this before, and it's not like it's their first rodeo as well. So if we just swap over to our next slide. So another part that we help with as well is with our resources. So there's a full library, as you can read on there, and there are all sorts that are included in that. There are books, as Matt was speaking about earlier, that you get access to. There are videos discussing topics. There are practice questions, past papers, like a whole academy that's all available online for obviously studying at your own sort of pace, although there is a curriculum for where you should be focusing as it gets closer to each part of your application. And if we just go over to our next slide. So another thing that we do is every week we hold enrichment seminars every Sunday, generally they start at 2 till about 3, half 3. So these weekly seminars are essentially university level lectures that sort of push you beyond A-level syllabus. So they just give you a lot more of an understanding on particular topics and subjects to really sort of help develop skills that you can discuss about in things like your personal statement or in the interviews as well. And just go over to our next one. We also have day courses as well. So these are sort of intensive day courses that are sort of near each part of the application process, so each hurdle. So for example, our personal statement one has just happened. With that, obviously you can develop a lot of skills for how to structure everything all in sort of one day to consolidate everything together. There are mock tests that we do, and there are 4 mock tests in one day. And then there are also the interview ones, which are done with a panel of different tutors. So that way you get 4 mock interviews with different tutors to get more sort of experience with all sorts of different interviewing styles as well during those as well.
Thanks very much, Rowan.
Thank you.
The good news is it does all seem to work. Our success rates as an organization are really good. We get a lot of offers, and our success rates for medicine are even better. So we're really proud of that. They compare really nicely with even some of the most fancy and expensive schools in the UK. We don't quite have the snazzy outfits of Eton. They all wear tailcoats and little hats. We don't have any hats, But we are just as successful and somewhat cheaper. I believe Eton is something like 35 grand a year now, maybe 40 grand. It's more than I can afford. Also, I'm too old. I don't need to go to school anymore. Big boy. We are really proud of the feedback we get as well. You can read reviews of all of our work on Trustpilot. And each week I encourage people to contribute a review on Trustpilot about me, saying how nice I am, how handsome, Rowan as well, how stylish and fun we are. Whoever does that first will get their review put into this and every one of these presentations going forward. So please do. I look forward to being able to, every week, read a page of people saying how nice I am. We also have a podcast which you can listen to. This is with our founder Rohan and my colleague Will, where they discuss everything from admissions tests through to zombie apocalypse, through an Oxbridge admissions lens. It's good fun, so I recommend that. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today and you would like to get in touch and perhaps to work with us, the way to do that is to visit uniadmissions.co.uk/booking, and you can book a consultation, which is a completely commitment-free, fee-free chance to chat to Rowan or to one of his colleagues, and figure out how we can help you. And hopefully this little video is going to show you how it's done. Let's see. It's a new video that I only made this morning. Oh, and it has typing noises on it. Let's get rid of those. And what we'll do now is we will take some questions. So let us start. So Maria asked about some of the colleges that take more students from the pool rather than direct applications. And she mentions Newnham and Girton. So the thing with Newnham and Girton to remember is these used to be all women's colleges, no boys. And that stereotype has sort of stuck around. So they tend to be relatively few boys at Newnham and Girton. If you like hanging out with a lot of girls, that's a good incentive for you as a boy. But that stereotype has tended to stuck a little bit, and that has made them a little bit less popular. But as we've discussed, broadly speaking, the college that you pick is not going to negatively impact your chances of going to the university. The only thing to bear in mind is that your chances of going to one of the fancier, older, Hogwartsier colleges are smaller than they are of getting into the university in general, because those tend to be the most popular ones. So I think this answers Joanne's question as well. I wouldn't worry too much about the college's acceptance rates when you're applying, because some of those students who are accepted but have been shuffled over to another college won't necessarily be included in there. Generally speaking, you will have just as good a chance of getting in regardless of which college you pick. Kausa asks about being taught from professors from other colleges. Yeah, so the tutorial part of the teaching is only maybe 3 or 4 hours a week for each of the areas that you're talking about. So you'll be working with academics from your own college on some areas, but you'll be heading off to the large-scale lectures on other topics. You'll be working with professors from other colleges. You know, you're not going to find yourself at a college with a lesser quality of academics, so you don't have to worry about that in terms of the quality of the experience you're getting. Matthew Perry asked about whether some colleges are cheaper than others. That is a good question. Certainly some of the colleges are richer than others, and so will be more generous in terms of bursaries. Some of the colleges will have cheaper food than others, will have perhaps cheaper accommodation. But those differences shouldn't be huge. And if it's something that's worrying you, then regardless of which college you go to, then you should be able to speak to them early on, have a conversation about that. And they are, on the whole, extremely proactive about promoting a diversity of people coming in, whether it's in terms of class or income or background. And so there is no Oxbridge college that is going to want you to be in a difficult position because you can't afford it. If that happens to be an issue, they will adjust things appropriately so that you can afford it. They are very good about this sort of thing. And I would say probably among the best universities out there for this. And so that is a big difference compared with particularly universities in London, where that kind of support isn't going to be quite as forthcoming, because there are more students, there's less money to pay to play with. And of course, London is much bigger and more expensive. There we go. Olive asks about the impact of your school on the likelihood that you'll be picked out from the pool. So your school will always have an impact on your application to an extent. You know, as we've talked about in previous weeks, students who are the best person from their school in 10 years, and they've come from a particular part of the country with low access to Oxbridge, and they're the first in their family to go to university. All of these things are going to help with your application, but they are not going to be an unfair advantage, because of course they are in themselves markers of disadvantage. If your dad went to Oxford and your mum went to Oxford and your sister went to Oxford, you might be a little bit less likely to get in on the basis of your family, but you will also be more likely to get in on account of all the help you'll get from your family. So while the context you're coming in from will have a small impact on your chances, it is designed to be balanced out by the advantage you might have got from those circumstances, if that makes any sense. On a related question, Anna Tilda asks about applying to the same college as your parent or grandparent. I would say I don't think it's going to make a particular difference to your chances of getting in. But I think that might be really nice. It will allow you to, you know, have a shared experience with that member of your family. It's something really charming that you'll have in common that you can talk about and share. I think that sounds lovely. I think that's a good idea. I would do it. In my own case, and this has come up in a couple of questions, I went to Emmanuel College at Cambridge, and the reason I chose that college was it was where my grandfather was going to go, but then the Second World War happened, so he couldn't, because he had to go and be in the Second World War. And he came back and he did something else instead. But that's you know, it's a nice little family link to have, and so if you can have that, I would go for it. Heaven has a question. Rowan, I'll hand that one over to you.
Yes. So your question was about sort of having a ballpark figure for obviously the investment that will be involved with one of our programs. Generally, we don't have sort of a ballpark figure, because we have each sort of program is more tailored to the particular student. So if you are obviously wanting to figure out, obviously completely commitment free, if you are wanting to obviously see how we can help with your law application, you can always get in touch with us, either booking up a meeting or interacting with our live chat, and then we'll be able to have a conversation. We can obviously see about that for you as well. Okay.
Fab. Thanks, Rowan. Oliver asked about time spent on assignments. Generally speaking, I would say that you should sort of approach Oxbridge education as a demanding full-time job. So you would expect to be working overall maybe 40 or 45 hours a week. And that's a mix of going to lectures, working on your assignments, lab work, essays, if you're doing an essay-based subject, time in the library. You know, if you are able to have the discipline to do it from 8:30 till 5:30 every day, you will get really good results. You will do really well, because a lot of other students will not have that level of discipline. I certainly have never had that level of discipline in my entire life. And so I think if you treat it like a job, that kind of level of commitment, you should be absolutely defined and do really well. Now, different people have different approaches. Some people like to have a lot of fun and then try and cram all of the studying in at the last minute. Some people like to not have any fun and just do studying. Some people like to not really do any studying in their first year and then catch up in later years. There are lots of different approaches you can take. But I would say on the whole, if you treat it like a full-time job, then you'll probably be all right in terms of the hour commitment. It is more commitment than you know, being at secondary school, but you know, you did sign up for it. Emily asked a question about international applicants. So the different colleges are all pretty open to international applicants. I don't think there are colleges that are particularly well known for taking more than others. Inevitably, the bigger colleges take slightly more, but it's all in proportion. And if you are coming from a school where quite a few people are applying to Oxford, I would generally suggest applying to different colleges each, not because you don't want to be there together, but because if you're coming from a school that sends a lot of people to Oxford or Cambridge, you don't want to be in a position where it's you and 5 other people going for a place at one college, because the college is perhaps going to be a little reluctant to have 8 or 9% of their intake that year coming from one school, and they all know each other, as that's not going to create a pleasant environment for the other 80 people they take on. So I would say make sure you're applying to different colleges, different courses, of course, that's fine. But you know, there isn't going to be a problem with you being more than 2 or 3 applicants from the one school. In fact, if we scroll back in our presentation, because we've got some facts on this one, you'll see that there are plenty of schools. So if we look at, say, the top few here, Hills Road, Peter Symonds, Westminster, King's College, there are plenty of schools that are sending 15, 20, maybe even 30 in some cases, people to Oxford. And you can see how if you were having 100 people apply to Oxford, all of them to one college, that might cause problems. You probably don't want all 20 of those people in one college. So I would spread yourselves out. But as long as you're not going to the kind of school that has 100 people apply to Oxbridge, you should be fine. So that should cover that. Nicole asked about unconventional qualifications. This sounds like a good opportunity to have a more detailed discussion, right, Rowan?
Yes, that would be something that we'll be able to obviously take into consideration and have a discussion with, probably outside of a meeting with everyone else, so we can properly find out exactly what the situation is and how it can influence your application.
Yeah. Kauza asks about using the facilities from different colleges. So you'll have access to the whole library of your college, the whole of the university libraries. It's called University Library at Cambridge. It's called Bodleian Library at Oxford. And those should have everything you need in them. Generally speaking, the colleges can be a little bit fussy about having students from other colleges come into their libraries. But I'm sure if you make good friends with someone from another college, you will be able to get in somehow. But on the whole, you should be able to access all the resources you need in your own college. And if they haven't got the book, you know, speak to the librarian, and within a couple of days, probably they will have the book. Those people love buying books, and so all the resources you need should be available. Oxford and Cambridge take real pride in making sure that you don't have to spend your own money on things like books, things like lab equipment, resources, even lab coats, things like that. If you are struggling to afford them, if you can't get access to them otherwise, those will be provided for you. And I think we'll just take 1 or 2 more questions before we disappear. Do the interviews differ between colleges? Not a great deal. The structure and the marking of the interviews is decided at a university-wide basis. We have, although we didn't bring it up in this week's presentation, I do have a copy of the interview kind of manual that explains how to do the interviews, how to mark them in exhaustive detail. It's about 110, 120 pages long. And so there is a lot of standardization. So it's very unlikely that you would do brilliantly at one college in your interview and do terribly in another. The system should be pretty well standardized. There's a lot of vetting and auditing that goes on to make sure that it's as fair as it possibly can be to all applicants. And I think we'll call it a day. There have been a few questions about colleges in particular. This again is one where I would direct you to the book. This is because I cannot remember the answers, and that's why I wrote them down, so I didn't have to remember them. So please do have a look at that if you're looking for college-specific questions. And I think we'll call it a day there. And Well, Rowan, thank you very much for joining me, especially at relatively short notice yesterday evening we organised this.
Yes, yeah. But it's lovely being here. I always enjoy the open days personally.
I also enjoy them. This is good little bit of work for me. This is. So we will hopefully speak to a whole load of you through the consultations in the coming weeks and days. And please do get in touch. It is 6 weeks until the application deadline now. You still have the chance to make a huge difference to the quality of your personal statement, to your interview prep. All those things you still have really a lot of control over now. Whereas if you come to us in 2.5 months, as we're closing on December, there's a lot less we can do. So this is a really good time for it, particularly if you are returning to school on Monday and a little bit worried about the level of support you're going to get from the school, because I know that they're going to be very busy with all sorts of things. Not just the virus, but making sure they can afford the heating bills, all the students who have come back, lots of challenges. And so if you are looking for support from us, then that's something we can very much provide. Thank you so much for joining me again, Rowan, and we'll see everyone next week when we'll be talking about the UCAT.
See you then.